Rawhide is essentially a hide that has been on-tanned. It can have a similar look and feel to parchment, being much lighter in color than leather made by traditional vegetable tanning methods. Rawhide, once it dries, it hardens. Imagine a rawhide dog bone. It's very dense and hard. This makes it a relatively durable material, but still soft enough that it can be cut and worked with. When dry, it feels like a very solid material. You can almost knock your hand on it and it'll kind of make like a knocking noise. It's that hard. However, it's also susceptible to water. And when it's like moistened or wet, it begins to soften and stretch. So you could actually wet rawhide and then bend it with your hand. That's pretty incredible. In one state, it's hard and you can knock on it and you'll hear a crack, and then on the other, with a little bit of water, you could actually bend it in your hand, no problem. Let's take a brief look into the history of rawhide leather use. It most likely started with ancient civilizations, when early humans hunted animals for food and used their hides for clothing, shelter, and tools. As they advanced, the use of rawhide became more widespread and was then used to make a wide variety of goods, such as armor, furniture, and bags. More specifically, Native American tribes were known for their skillful use of rawhide, using it for clothing, teepees, moccasins, and drums. The rawhide was stretched and dried over a frame, creating in that a durable, water-resistant material that was great for outdoor use. In medieval Europe, rawhide was used for various purposes including leather armor, footwear, belts, book bindings, and straps. And during the American frontier era, pioneers and settlers would often find rawhide used extensively. For example, covered wagons often had some rawhide components to them, a very popular method of transport during that time. And in modern day, while tanning processes have evolved in a number of ways, including abilities to scale up production in a lot of commercial applications, this tanning rawhide leather still has its place. And it's used often for, drum heads, tambourines, percussion instruments, knife sheaths, unique projects, and the ever popular dog chews. So let's take a really up close look so you can see rawhide yourself. Here we have a top view of rawhide. And if you look, it's going to have some interesting characteristics. The first is that it's relatively shiny. This material, you could actually tap it with your finger and hear like a knock, knock, knock. It's that hard. So this surface itself represents that, in that it is shiny, and very dense and hard. We can see the original grain pattern of those leather fibers here in the rawhide, just as you would on a vegetable tan or chrome tan leather, except again, this one's really, really sturdy. And along with that, you see some of the characteristics of an outer layer of leather, kind of having that original pattern still present. The color is also relatively unique. It's going to vary a little bit hide to hide, but it's usually going to be a lighter color, and often it can be translucent, where you can almost see through it. It's not going to be transparent, at all, but there almost has some, light diffusion translucency, which is also relatively unique to a rawhide leather. All right, here's the bottom. And as you can see too, it's a relatively consistent, very dense grain pattern to it. It almost feels like plastic. You can knock, knock, knock right on it. And you're not going to see a lot of fiber, kind of individual fibers or softness or any kind of a fuzzy touch to it. This is going to be, almost rock hard. And here's the section view. And now you could really see, where this material differs. We've got our top layer, as we've looked at, which is going to be strong and dense. We've got our bottom layer, strong and dense. If we look in the middle, we got strong and dense. It's essentially a, very thick, consistent structure throughout this entire hide. That's one of the characteristics of the rawhide, is that it's going to be strong like this. What also makes it interesting is that when we apply water to it, it will begin to make these fibers flexible. And then once it dries again, it'll be as hard as it is right now. So it's really cool to be able to kind of see inside, knowing that it's going to have some, durable exterior characteristics, but you also see that carried through for the most part on the inside of that leather as well. For the production process, it typically starts with a hide that can be buffalo, deer, elk, cattle. Probably the first image that pops to mind could be a deer, out in the wilderness. All that is prepped, and then it essentially is hung and stretched over a frame to dry. It then becomes a very firm, almost see-through material. Once it dries, at this point, it's pretty much ready. It's rawhide leather. It's one of the benefits of why it was done so often, especially out in the wilderness without a lot of processing tools or tanning capabilities. You can get a very usable, functional material with relatively little comparable effort. That said, once it's dry, there's a few things that can be done. One, it can be oiled or greased, and that can provide some waterproofing characteristics to it. But again, it can also be moistened with water, which will then make it flexible and malleable to make it into different shapes. Once that dries in that unique shape, you can then apply oils or greases to help make it a little more waterproof, thereby getting a usable good where in this case water is an asset in its creation rather than something to fully avoid until the project is complete. For cost, you're probably going to find it for around $6 to $9 per square foot for rawhide leather. There are going to be some variabilities in that. You could find it less expensive or more expensive. But in this case, the key factors are going to be the type of hide that it came from, and then also the tanning process used. This is a relatively unique type of leather in that an individual, in their yard could tan this, and you could also find it, at a more commercial level from a tannery. So it's pretty cool because most, tanning methods require extensive time, and usually in modern day are going to be, more, mechanized commercial operations. This is totally different. So for that, the price range is going to vary, the qualities are going to vary, and basically just educate yourself on the differences. So if you're looking for this, you're going to choose a type that fits the end look and feel that you want for your project. Some pros are that rawhide can be more durable than some other natural leathers. It can be especially tough, resisting abrasions. It can be, in some places, kind of scratch and almost cut resistant-ish. Definitely not proof, but ish. And it's got a very hard surface to it. So you can mold it into a bunch of functional pieces that you may not do with a typical leather, because this is going to have a little more structural rigidity to it, which is going to open up a new availability of things that you can make. And it's relatively lightweight. Since it is a very dry material, when the water is out of it, that water weight is not in it. And so there aren't a lot of oils or conditioners to kind of make it denser or heavier. So essentially you get a really strong, durable, lightweight, moldable material. Makes it pretty incredible. Some cons are that it is sensitive to moisture. If you're using this in an outdoor application, you're likely going to craft with it first, using any kind of water to make it malleable and then finish it, and then seal it with some type of a, coating, waterproof coating, a resin, something like that, so that the water helps you in your crafting, but doesn't then make your item essentially, fold in or flop or, misshapen during use. So just be aware of that. It can be a con depending on where it's going to be used. Another thing to keep in mind is that it is prone to cracking. Since it is a very dry material by its nature, that gives it the strength that gives it the benefits of being very hard and scratch resistant. However, that also makes it more prone to cracking. So depending on your use case, keep that in mind, because that may be a con to this type of material. A few good things that rawhide is excellent for include mallets and hammers. So you may have seen rawhide mallets. They're essentially rawhide that's rolled up very tight and sometimes soaked in an acrylic or something to give it extreme density. And they can be used for a very long time and even replaced and things like that. So rawhide for hammer and mallet heads is relatively common. We see it in drums. We see it in tambourine covers. Sometimes even maracas are made from them. You can find it very commonly as a dog chew. And then there's other things that it can be used for, like arts and crafts, furniture, sometimes even lampshades, or backings on bows, all kinds of things, both functional and decorative. So you're really only limited by your creativity and how you might use rawhide in your projects. A few tips for working with rawhide. One, if you never have, get some scrap and play around with it. It's going to respond vastly differently than most any other leather that's out there, so you want to get some experience with it. Along with that, when you are going to work with it and shape it, make sure you have water handy, because you could apply that on there. Don't use too much. It will respond to a little bit, so just add a little bit more at a time as you're working with it, just enough to make it flexible to where you need it to be, and then that should be enough. And then lastly, if you're making something that you're going to be using outdoors, such as like a knife sheath or any kind of a tool that will be out in the elements, maybe rain, things like that, it's best to usually cover it if you can with a kind of waterproofer or protectant. This can be a Resolene or other kind of waterproofing agent. That way, if you're out with it in the rain, it doesn't become actually soft, and whatever purpose you created it for is now it's not going to serve it as well. So just keep the environment in mind. And if you're going to use it outdoors a lot and comfortable with that shape being relatively permanent, you can coat it with some type of a waterproofing element. So there you have it, a look into rawhide leather. It's wild. It can be super hard, almost like plastic, or it could be very flexible when wet. It's a unique material in that respect, and it's also a very functional one as well. Depending on how you cut it, what you use it for, and what that product is going to be, it can lead to a variety of new options for crafting. And if it's something that you want to try, it could work out really, really well.